feedback on a document that the members of the ad hoc, who are some of whom are here on the panel, though there are a number of others who potentially are joining us in the sort of community side of things, or are not here today, or not available. But a vital portion of how we move forward with this kind of policy is to ensure that we have as much community feedback on the finished product as possible. And this is one of those aspects of how we are hoping to accomplish that. So, sorry, one second. Sorry, family in the other room. Chair Jackson should be joining us soon. She has some, I'm sure.
I'm here.
Oh, great. Chair, please. I'm just stalling for time until you're available to start the sort of welcome and share your thoughts, and then I'll pick it back up with facilitating the panel. Thank you.
Appreciate it. I am so sorry. I just couldn't get in. My fault, everyone. But good evening and welcome to the public hearing of the Missing Persons Ad Hoc Committee. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted online for anyone unable to be with us tonight or for your reference in the future. So let me start by thanking the members of this ad hoc. I'm incredibly proud of the way we've developed this, the process that we followed to get us here and the progress we've made. Because of the tenacity, diligence, time, and effort of every single person on this committee, we're presenting powerful, empathetic, and thorough draft policy for your review and comment. We took this line by line literally, and I'm so grateful and so proud and humbled by the weeks and hours and evenings spent to bring this to you. Thank you to the families, particularly the families of missing persons who wanted so much to ensure that other families would have a way forward, that they contributed in such an extraordinary way. Thank you to the community members, to the subject matter experts, and to the Oakland Police Department. Now, this policy isn't done yet. It's close, but it's not done. And we are looking to you, every single person who is logged on tonight, to tell us what you think. What, if anything, we've missed, what else we can do with this document. We're hoping that you'll take the time to review the draft we've put together, and you can do that by just clicking through to the ad hoc webpage from the Police Commission Policy website. We're using a platform that allows you to leave your comments right in the document. And for those of us still grappling with technology, you'll know that this Police Commission welcomes your thoughts in whatever capacity. So feel free to email your ideas and suggestions, or join us at our next commission meeting on November 18th and use your voice to share during public comment. Back to tonight, to the policy and perhaps some of the stories you'll hear over the next few hours. Let me acknowledge and ask you to hold your hearts. Those missing or lost, those who are missing a loved one and desperate to have them return. This is an incredibly difficult topic, but so critically important. I want us to be mindful, for some of us, that this, when what you might hear may be triggering. Please look after yourselves. Mute this, step away from your computer if it's too much, and know that this forum was designed with the intent of making you aware of new information and to hold space. So do what you need to be okay. I'm handing the reins to Commissioner Jordan this evening, and I thank him for moving this forward on behalf of the commission and for designing what promises to be a fresh and engaging approach to public forums with a panel discussion and prompts shared on the flyer for members of the public to weigh in on. I can't thank you enough, Commissioner Jordan, for your leadership, your innovation, your thoughtfulness. And with that said, take it away, man.
Thank you, Chair. So to begin with, we've asked Michelle Azinayo, who's been a vital part of this ad hoc, as well as a very important part in just getting this ad hoc in panel. Those of you who follow what the commission is doing will recognize her. She has been at the majority of commission meetings over the last few years, advocating for the Bandabela family, as well as other families of victims. And in some ways, she is the sort of core and the advocate for all of the community who couldn't take part in this process. So fittingly, we've asked her to provide us with a bit of a narrative synopsis about how we got here to start this ad hoc and what the process through the ad hoc to where we are now has been. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Azinayo, and I'm a community representative on the Ad Hoc Missing Persons Policy Committee. How did my involvement begin? On May 6, 2019, I received a telephone call from a community partner, a soccer coach, who told me that one of his players had disappeared. He asked me if I could help. Well, he told me about Jonathan Bandabela and asked me if I could help his family to find him. I accompanied his parents to speak out during city council and police commission meetings where we tried to get advocacy. And after some time, his family asked me to be their spokesman. Police Commissioner Janelle Harris, after we attended meetings for 4 months, stepped up and volunteered to act as our liaison. She facilitated meetings where the Bandabela family and I were able to speak directly to OPD supervisors, detectives, and even former Chief Kirkpatrick. Commissioner Harris and I read everything we could find on missing persons policies and procedures. We made OPD aware that their existing missing person policy, Departmental General Order O-6, was outdated and needed to be revised to reflect the current best standard practices. Before this ad hoc committee was established, OPD was responsive to our suggestions, especially regarding increasing public awareness via social media outreach. April 2020, OPD provided an information report to the Public Safety Committee, along with updated investigative checklists. They also created a missing persons page on the on the City of Oakland website as an additional resource to share active missing persons cases with the community. They answered common questions about how to make a missing persons report and about Amber Alerts. April 2nd, 2021, OPD produced a 7-minute YouTube video with step-by-step explanation that families could follow called Missing Person Facts, which they shared on all of their social media platforms. These are improvements that OPD made prior to the formation of this committee. The Missing Persons Policy Committee began its work in April 2021 and brought together members of the Oakland Police Department, the Oakland Police Commission, the Citizens Police Review Agency, the Department of Violence Prevention, and the community. One critical factor was for us to include the voices of families directly impacted by OPD's missing persons policy. Some families expressed interest to participate, and we understood the importance of their presence in including them to be part of this conversation. It was important for us to acknowledge their lived experiences, to listen to their critique, their perspective, input, suggestions, and incorporate them into this policy. Our objective is to update OPD's missing and abducted persons policy to reflect the current best standard practices, which includes changes to the law, updated procedures and processes, timely and widespread media outreach, incorporating the use of body-worn cameras, and providing resources for reporting parties and the community. The California Penal Code sections 14211 and 14212 were updated September 28, 2020. These sections cover missing persons reports and procedures with significant changes added. OPD has already implemented the following changes as part of their missing persons checklist and investigative procedures. They are all included in this draft policy. California law has expanded the definition of at-risk youth from only being those 16 and under to include all missing individuals under the age of 21. If the missing person is under 21 years of age or there is evidence that the person is at risk, the police department or sheriff's department shall broadcast a be on the lookout bulletin without delay within its jurisdiction. If the person reported missing is under 21 years of age, or if there is evidence that the person is at risk, the law enforcement agency receiving the report shall, within 2 hours after the receipt of the report, electronically transmit the report to the Department of Justice via the California Law Enforcement Telecommunications System for inclusion in the Violent Crime Information Center and the National Crime Information Center databases. An Endangered Missing Advisory, an EMA, is a new tool available to law enforcement agencies investigating the suspicious disappearance of at-risk missing children or other endangered persons. An EMA provides immediate information to the public to aid in the swift recovery of at-risk persons. EMAs fulfill the federally mandated requirement of the Ashanti Alert Act of 2019. This is similar to an amber or a silver alert, but this change allows law enforcement to issue an alert for missing persons between 18 to 64 years of age. There was no special alert for those 18 to 64 before. The Department of Justice Missing Persons Report Form, a CJIS 8568, was updated in 2018 to include the silver alert and the EMA. This form is already being used by OPD, but was added to the new policy. The Police Officers Standards and Trainings, POST, updated their missing persons investigations guidelines and curriculum in May 2021. OPD is utilizing the Department of Justice investigative checklist for first responders and the Post Missing and Unidentified Persons Reporting Reference Chart. Outreach and social media. This committee is still working on developing specific requirements for social media use in missing persons investigations, and creating innovative ideas and partnerships can make Oakland a leader in this area. Currently, these changes are being facilitated by the Media Relations Office, which includes their Strategic Communications Manager and Public Information Officers. OPD and the Police Commission have plans to establish a social media policy separate from the City of Oakland and solely covering employees of OPD. The Media Relations Office has their own policies and procedures separate from Departmental General Order O-6. This committee will be making recommendations to the Media Relations Office regarding their policies that affect missing persons outreach, social media coverage, and the public alerts. The Media Relations Office has been responsive to our suggestions and improved the timeliness of their posts on OPD's social media platforms. This committee is still working on finalizing this section of the policy. OPD didn't use body-worn cameras when the original missing persons policy was written. This draft policy includes how responding and investigating officers should activate and use their body-worn cameras throughout a missing persons investigation, especially when interviewing involved parties, taking statements, and documenting investigative steps. In order to establish community partnerships and provide more resources to the community, this committee invited Amba Johnson from Dreamcatchers to speak as a subject matter expert on human trafficking. She was later invited to speak to the OPD Academy recruits about their intersection of human trafficking and missing persons cases, to make them aware of the signs, the risk factors, and prevalence of commercial sex trafficking in Oakland. OPD's newly established victim specialist is now creating literature to share with families and the larger community to educate them about the available resources and support services they may need. OPD receives 100 new missing persons reports each month, and that is a lot. Although OPD is understaffed and under-resourced, the community is still expecting them to locate their missing family members. Updating this policy is a first step and offers an opportunity for OPD to build positive relationships with 100 families each month. Members of this committee have demonstrated courageous leadership, and with the implementation of our innovative ideas, we can create community partnerships that can supplement and assist OPD in their efforts. A breakthrough is described as big changes resulting after continuous effort and courageous consistency. When this policy receives critical community input and is finalized by this committee, Chief Armstrong, and finally the Police Commission, it will produce a breakthrough which will allow OPD to build trust with the community by delivering on its promise that OPD cares. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for your continued advocacy for missing persons and families of missing persons. So we're going to move on to a little bit of a conversation with our subject matter expert panel. To begin that, I'd like each of you, one at a time, to introduce yourselves and sort of briefly tell us sort of how you're connected to this and what brought you here, other than us asking you to be here. I will just call you one at a time. Uh, Officer Latifah Davis, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Latifah Davis. I'm a community service officer here at BART Police Department. I'm also the missing persons coordinator here. Met with Commissioner Jordan and Oakland Police Department when they were trying to come up with a new policy. And so that's how I was introduced to them, and they invited me to the panel for my insight on missing persons.
Thank you. Meredith Marzoli.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Meredith Marzoli, and I am an investigator with the Community Police Review Agency, which is essentially the investigative arm of the Police Commission and part of the City of Oakland. And for those of you who don't know, we do parallel investigations with internal affairs of OPD into complaints of police misconduct. And the way I got involved is just through my investigative work at CPRA and my interest in, working on a very important topic, which is missing persons cases, and seeing that there were some things that OPD could be doing better from a policy standpoint. So our executive director gave me the opportunity to join in on the ad hoc, which I'm very thankful for. And it's been a really rewarding experience to see how the process works and also make those contributions, sort of adding my voice and the voice of CPRA to the process. So I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to hearing your questions and hopefully providing some information.
Thank you. Sergeant Young.
Good evening. My name is Sergeant Young with the Oakland Police Department. I am in charge of the Missing Persons Unit and the draft when we began this. I just want to thank the board for all of your time and all the hours you guys have put in volunteering and creating this policy. Could not have done this without you guys. Yeah, that's me, and then I'll pass it on.
Thank you. Harrison Bandabela.
Yes, pretty much I'm working with Michelle. As she said before, she came on board previously to assist with my brother being missing. So she invited me to this. Initially, I didn't respond just because it's been a lot and it's been extremely overwhelming since I have to pretty much serve as a spokesperson to my family. But pretty much decided to do it this time. Just because I felt like it was something that's needed to be done. And it's been exhausting, to say the least, but it's something that I know I have to continue doing until Jonathan is found. And even when he is found, I do feel I want to take place and continue helping.
Thank you very much. And I think it bears repeating that the issues at hand are very real for a lot of people. And we should always center this conversation in sort of a lens of compassion. At times we can sort of get hung up on politics or resources and money and efficiency, but there's a very real human component to this, and I think it's important that we are always mindful of that. To begin with, I'd ask Sergeant Young to provide us with a really brief quantitative overview of what sort of the caseload and scope looks like for OPD around missing persons investigation. So Sergeant Young, if you can go ahead and get that started. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the Oakland Police Department receives about anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 cases a year. Currently, We have 1,164 cases that have come in. We have solved 1,023 of them. We have about an 87% solve rate, which is pretty good. Each investigator holds probably, depending on which cases are which, anywhere from 100 cases to 500 cases, depending on how many cases have come in. We have 2 investigators for the city, and we are starting to utilize, we've actually restructured to where we have our intake officers are handling some of the runaways and so forth that go back and forth all the time. And our missing persons investigators are dedicated specifically to exigent cases. So we've made a lot of critical changes, which has helped tremendously. And a lot of that was suggestions from the board. So thank you guys for that. And in a nutshell, that's kind of the amount of cases, the average cases that we have at the Oakland Police Department currently.
Thank you, Sergeant Young. So to begin with, I guess I'd just like to ask everyone here on the panel, given your own personal experience, either as an investigator or as a community member or a family member of somebody who's been affected by this, what are the biggest challenges involved in the investigations of missing persons, and what are the sort of the gaps or the things that you've seen that need to be addressed, and potentially if you have any insight into what you'd like to see to address those challenges and how we can move forward. Because of the sort of nature of the way my setup is on this tablet that I'm forced to use for this, it's a little hard for me to see hands sometimes. So if people can just sort of kind of respectfully call out and we can move forward as though we're just having a conversation. So anybody have some burning thoughts to jump in here? If not, I will just call on you.
I would say a very important component that came up for Jonathan's family and for a lot of the other families is to believe the family. And so I know that we're all a lot of adults kind of have a pattern. You know, some people call their parents every day. Some people go to the gym every day. People kind of have established patterns. And so people that are closest to those people know what that person's typical pattern is. And so even when someone is calling into the police department and describing something that may seem not serious or not unusual, or like a typical behavior that an adult or a teenager may engage in, you have to believe the reporting party. You have to believe the family, the person that knows them the best. You know, if someone always calls their mother, they really always call their mother. If they never miss a day calling their grandmother, that's significant. If someone doesn't know anybody in an area where some of their property was found, that's significant. And so I know that a lot of these families felt as though when they described circumstances that they felt meant it was very, very serious, that's not how it's received by the person on the other end of the line or by the officer that came to talk to them, especially when they weren't, you know, young or a child. And so I would say that a big component is trust and believe the family.
Great, thank you. Officer Davis, I'm actually really curious. I know that this sort of scope and context of the work that you do is a little different than what OPD is doing, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are and sort of what the challenges are involved with these kind of investigations, and maybe some thoughts on how to address them.
Okay, so for me, kind of similar a little bit to what Michelle said, just creating a relationship with the family that's calling in to report missing persons, building a relationship with them, believe what they're saying, and just having compassion for what they're going through. They're missing someone in their family that they're used to having around. And most of us don't know what that feels like. So just putting yourself in their position and understanding that this is a loved one, someone that they care about. And so you have to follow up with them, make phone calls to them, every day, if you have to, every day, just communicating with them, because they know everything that we need to know, and trying to help us locate their family member. They know about their social media accounts, they know about their friends, school, places they hang out. So just believing in what they have to tell us and what they're saying to us, and also us just following up and following through with all the information that we have is very important that we do that. That is something that when I get a case on my desk, that even if I don't have any new information to give to the family members, I call them every day, sometimes 2 times a day, just to see if they have any new information, if they remember any small detail that they can give to me to help me be able to try and locate their family member. So that's one of the biggest challenges, is just not following up, just not following through and getting information from the family members and people who are calling in and reporting, and then also using that information and putting it out there to other officers, because sometimes we get information and we don't share it. So I think that it's important, and that's another challenge we have, is when we receive this information, to share it with all the other officers and other department agencies as well.
Great, thank you. And I will say that um, in talking to you, Officer Davis, and talking to the folks at BART PD, one of the things that we heard was just that there was an incredible amount of there was a very human approach to the investigation. And we were really struck by that, and that sort of bilateral information sharing was something that we found to be sort of great importance. And additionally, when we early on in the ad hoc, we had Michelle shared a lot of her experiences with the Bandavela family, as well as Deneen Duggar, who was the sister of Tatiana Duggar, joined us and shared her experience. And all of that really did go towards sort of our looking to draft, bring in additional resources and make those available, and sort of centralize that information. And I think that what was done around that was fairly effective. And I think we're just sort of looking to expand that further and further. Also, one of the things that came out of this was looking at more innovative ways for OPD to use their civilian staff to do some of the legwork and sort of in places where sworn officers weren't necessary, to do the follow-up and information sharing and things like that. So Harrison Bandabela, do you have anything to add about what your experiences are with this and what you found to be most challenging?
Yeah, I can pretty much echo off of what Michelle said, and also Officer Davis, about as far as the communication, the empathy, we're trying to stay humane through the process, and also believing the families. That was one of our, almost everything has been difficult, but that's one of the main things initially when Jonathan first went missing, was having the officers believe us that Jonathan is always active on his social media. He always talks to my mom. He always talks to his sister. He always talks to me. He's very active with his friends. He's very close with his friends. And just trying to have the officers believe that, and also believe us that just because his car is found on the bridge, that doesn't mean he jumped over a bridge. And for us to have that connection, and to have the officers take note of that, that was extremely difficult, because they continuously searched the waters, and couldn't find anything. Months later, still continuously searching the waters, and we're still telling them, like, he's not in there. And it's to the point where they're like, well, his body could end up in Mexico, because they've seen that instance before, which is a rare case. But it's like, we don't want to, we understand there's rarities to things. However, we don't find that to be going on here. We think there's something else going on. So just to, like I said, just echo off that, that was one of the initial difficulties we had was trying to build that connection and for us to have those detectives believe what we were saying initially when everything first happened.
Thank you. Sergeant Young, you have anything you'd like to add?
Yes. So as far as difficulties and problems, just quite simply, the missing persons unit gets overwhelmed. You've heard how many cases we get. We have 2 investigators. Just to respond, we have to remain neutral and we have to try to look at every angle possible. We also have to look at different ways to try to use what we have, the resources we have, the groups that we work with. And so when we're doing this, a lot of these times you have this lag, and we would love to be in communication with the families constantly. We've changed things up to where our service technicians are calling and trying to keep in contact. But it's a very, very difficult task. These investigations are extremely complex. They involve a lot of warrant writing for IP addresses, for devices. A lot of times you would think that you could just ask another agency, hey, can I get the film for this? But a lot of times those require search warrants. So there's this big delay. So a lot of time it takes a lot of time and resources to do these things. So that's one of the biggest things that the challenges that we have. And of course, my unit is always looking for ways to curtail that, to make things faster, to use technology to our benefit. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we've done, sent our investigators to something called cache mapping. So what before used to take, you have to subpoena or search warrant service on the cell phone of the missing person. You get the data back, but it comes back in this big raw Excel file, which before the investigator would have to pinpoint spot by spot, longitude, latitude on a map in order to get these triangulations. So this cache mapping, what this did is this allowed the officers to take all of that data, and what used to take hours takes them minutes now. So things like this, we're constantly looking for to try to improve things. We're trying to build relationships with different agencies. We're trying to use the things that pop up. Michelle mentioned EMA. We try to use that. We try to use everything at our disposal. But the most difficult thing that I find is a lot of people don't understand how complex and how much work is going into these investigations because they're not seeing it from our end. And I would love, that's why I like having the board together, because now they understand after we've been talking, and they understand the complexities of these things. And, one other thing, the human element, man, my investigators love to just be talking to people constantly, and they try as hard as they can, but they also still have to write the warrants. They have to make the phone calls. They have to follow up on the leads. They have to view the video footage. A lot of these things, I mean, imagine with 100 cases coming in a month. And granted, some of those are runaways and returns. Some of those are people we call them frequent flyers. They're gone from the hospital, they're back, or nursing home. But when we get to these exigent cases, these cases take a high priority and all bells and whistles go off, and it's an enormous amount of resources. Sometimes we're calling in other agencies like the FBI, DOJ. And I really wish that we could show what happens during one of these investigations so people would understand why there's sometimes a lack of a phone call back, or maybe there's a delay. I wish we could show these things. So that's part of what I find to be difficult in these investigations.
I'm curious if you could share with us what, in your estimation, and nobody's going to hold you to this, or but sort of a general, like, what percentage of your cases are these sort of priority and exigent cases that are because many of them, as you said, are your frequent flyers and other things. But
Wise, I would say it's a small percentage. I would say probably around anywhere from 5 to 10%. But that 5 to 10% is a huge undertaking when these investigations come up. So yeah, about 5 to 10%, and really it depends on the month. Some months we've had 5 or 6 priority cases come in. Sometimes we've had up to 10. It really depends, but on average, I would say probably around 5 to 10%.
Okay. And I think it's important that the context of what that looks like and the scope, because these policies don't exist on just on paper. They have to be sort of responsive to what the real challenges are. And I think that when we're thinking about how to innovate, I mean, you can only innovate your way, technology your way out of so much sort of resource or lack of resource related challenges. But it is one of our best weapons right now in trying to sort of
I think it's important too that the public knows that we built this policy to grow as the police department grows. We're looking into the future. So when we get more investigators, when we get more resources, when things come up, the commission here has all of us together. We've built this policy to kind of a footprint into the future, not necessarily what we have now, but also expanding into the future. So hopefully people will take the time to read it and give the feedback.
Great, thank you. Meredith, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just kind of, it's sort of piggybacking on what everybody has said already. I think there's sort of like two challenges, one of which obviously is what Sergeant Young has talked about, is really that OPD is understaffed in regards to how many people they have working on missing persons cases. But I think also one thing that I noticed from my perspective is sort of like how the legislative and strategic framework is mapped out. There are, there are certain specific things that need to be done in each case, and they need to be done very quickly. But there are also several things that are very subjective. So I think Harrison and Michelle kind of mentioned this, where it's like, you have to, an officer needs to identify whether somebody is either at risk or, and one of the ways you can be at risk is like, do they have a pattern of disappearing, or have they done something that's outside of their pattern? And I think that, so it can be somewhat subjective in terms of determining whether somebody is in this category. And I've noticed that that's something that really does need to be a focal point. And I think that one of the things that we've done on the ad hoc committee is to try to shore up sort of like checks and balances, which I think is really important for not only the subjective portion, but also for, hey, there's, these 8 things that need to be done, making sure that there is somebody who's going to be reviewing things and within a very timely, sort of an overly timely fashion, because as we know, the first hours or day when somebody's missing is really crucial to finding out, hey, are they using social media, are they doing all these different things? And so I think those are the challenging pieces, to kind of really identify what is happening in the case and run with it as quickly as possible. But I think hopefully this new policy is going to be putting a bunch of layers in to address that.
Thank you very much. Since we're sort of discussing that, and sort of continuing on with what Sergeant Young was saying about sort of the aspirational nature of this particular policy and how it's specific to Oakland and its challenges and strengths, I'd like to ask, I guess primarily Meredith and Sergeant Young, but Michelle, feel free to weigh in on this as well. How do you see, after sort of such a long process of reviewing this policy, how do you guys see this policy as being responsive to the specific needs of Oakland, and how is that sort of outside of what we see, as Michelle mentioned, there are a lot of sort of post and DOJ standards that have to be met within this policy writing, but we took great pains to sort of make sure that this is specific to Oakland. What's your perspective on that? Whichever one. Let's go Meredith first, since you were just talking.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is just kind of what I just mentioned, which is because Oakland does get so many reports of missing persons, I think that one of the pieces is really important that we sort of still continue to prioritize, that the policy prioritizes every missing person and making sure that they're properly categorized and making sure that the alerts are going out. I think also, one of that one of those aspects is also communication with the public. And I think that's kind of getting written in there as well, in terms of what people, and also what they're doing right now is putting people, putting information out there for the community to know how best to respond. So I'll leave it at that and let Michelle and Sergeant Young respond.
Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think that since the committee started and they are having supervisors check every single missing persons report that comes in, I'm not sure, how soon after it comes in, but I know it's the same day. So I'm hoping that second set of eyes is going to catch maybe things that may have qualified as at risk that maybe the reporting officer didn't get. Definitely, he's telling, Sergeant Young is telling us how there's a very small percentage of them that are complicated. And so the more that we can increase and engage the community at connecting with OPD for these other cases, they can be solved quickly to free up the resources and the small manpower that they do have with their 2 investigators in that unit. And I think that the checklist that we've come up with really eliminate a lot of the holes of making mistakes that happened before. And so I just think it's a starting point. I know that they're already reviewing every missing persons case that comes in, which that's going to help. And I just think that, some of the things to be solved probably will not be solved by Oakland. That's why I think that some of these community partnerships, especially for prevention, will maybe reduce the numbers over 5 years. That's what I'm hoping, because I don't think that the kids, the young people that are out there, I don't think they realize what the risk factors are that they're going to come across when they, leave for a night or 2 nights. And so, yeah, I think we've started it. What's that saying? If not now, when? And if not us, who? So, I think that we've started something, and we're going to move forward from the policy and then work from there.
Great, thank you. Sergeant Young?
I think that a couple of things are really good that we've done in this policy, tailored specifically to Oakland. First, the cameras. We talked earlier about how sometimes the preliminary officer, they may come off cold or so forth. We're going to be able to see kind of the emotion and the things that are going on at the scene at the time. Because you have to remember, when my investigators get these, it's usually the next day, or sometimes we'll call them out in the middle of the night, depending on what kind of the call it is. But usually they're getting these reports the next day, and a lot of times they don't know, they're looking at a piece of paper. So I like the fact that we've included the body worn camera in there, leave it on so we can see what's going on. And the officer may miss something because they're busy working, taking the report. We may pick up on it. Also, you have to remember, some of these missing persons, they turn into other crimes. Sometimes they're hiding a murder. Sometimes there's a kidnapping. Sometimes there's a parental kidnapping. So there's a lot of these things that are going on. So I'm glad we included that part. The second part I'm glad is that we have put in there about the notification to the other agencies. If people do not know who are tuning in right now, the agency where the person lives is the agency responsible for that investigation. So if I go missing, I live in Oakland, and I go missing in San Diego, Oakland is still responsible for that investigation. So we have streamlined that to immediately go out to that agency. We're still going to assist. We're going to be on the ground assisting them, but we want to make sure, per DOJ standards, everything is there, because we've had some hiccups with that, and we don't want that happening again. So I'm glad we built that in there. And then finally, a lot of the social media aspects have been put into the policy, and we've given it room to grow as social media grows. So those are things that are going to help out my unit quite a bit. And if my unit gets bigger, we can use this even more.
Thank you. So pretty soon we're going to move into sort of community Q&A section here, but I think that one of the things that was I think the 2 pieces that were the biggest, from my perspective, the biggest aspects, especially early on in this conversation, was the sort of what was touched on earlier around, we heard from members of the ad hoc, and anecdotally, we've heard that um, that sort of communication with um, to victims and families of victims and loved ones of victims, and providing that support is vital. And we heard again from Michelle and Mr. Vandevela, how they experienced that themselves. What specifically from any of you do you see as a way to move forward, sort of blue sky thinking, outside of, because as discussed, some of this is, we are intended to be aspirational. We are trying to build in growth and sort of forward thinking into this policy. What do we do to improve the types of support, both informationally and just sort of compassionate support, even if it's partnering with outside organizations? How do we do that? What are you, from your perspective, how do we get there?
Commissioner Jordan, I just want to say that I think that you guys are headed in the right direction. You guys are opening up and you're contacting and looking at other policies, other departments and other agencies. And I think that you guys keeping the communication open and being open to learning new ways of doing things and new resources, even if it's coming from an agency and it's something that's different. I think that's something that's important that you guys have stepped into and that you're trying to do. And I think that's something that's great for the community, that you guys are looking out and trying to find new ways to battle missing persons. I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that.
Commissioners, this is Sergeant Young. Can I jump in? Okay. One of the things that we've discussed, and this actually came from Michelle, is hopefully reaching out to another agency where they can liaison with the family to let them know what's going on as we are doing our work behind the scenes in the investigations. We don't have those resources now, but this is something me and my team have discussed and something we would definitely like to have in the future. But as of now, we don't have that. What ideally we would like to see is an intermediary that is in constant contact with the family. Ms. Davis talked about 2 phone calls a day. That would be awesome. But we just simply don't have the ability to do that right now. But that is something that we would like to have in the future.
Thank you. Any other thoughts?
I mean, I would just echo that I think there is a huge piece of the sort of community liaison and like family contact that unfortunately OPD is not really, it seems like they're under-resourced and they're not meeting that challenge necessarily. And I think that finding a way to make that happen in some way, it could be a civilian. I think also there might be ways to, and this is more into the nitty gritty, it's not really what we've specifically worked on with the policy, but Sergeant Young brings up a really good point about how laborious it is to like write all the social media warrants and things like that. And so if there's any way to kind of bring in a tech or somebody extra that could facilitate some of the actual investigative work, maybe that's a thought as well. But I do think the community contact piece is just crucial for both like the empathy piece, but also just, oh, well, when I was talking to the family today, they mentioned this piece that we hadn't already been aware of, or there's been a development. And I know that that has been a challenge for people to be able to communicate those updates to OPD.
Thank you. Mr. Bandabella or Michelle, do you have anything to add from your perspective as community members and people affected by this? Um, you know, barring sort of the limited resources that we have, like if we could put a thing into place, what would that be? What would you see as the greatest aid in sort of providing that sort of bridge to victims and victims' families um, and that those things that we heard that were so vital?
I think initially, as far as from my experience, would be to, as far as the detectives know the resources that they have available. Because from my experience, there was multiple times where the detectives, spoke about that they never knew about having this type of resource or this type of technology, and this is their first time using it. And for example, would be some type of tech that they use to search for, I believe, for bodies or obstacles or anything within the waters, and they used that for the first time. It was the first time it was being used ever, and it happened to be for my little brother's case. And one of the things would be to extract and use all your resources, because let's say if you do have to write all the warrants, I'm pretty sure as a detective, there's other departments where they have to write their warrants too as well. And I'm pretty sure not all of them write their warrants. They probably do have a tech that does it. So to use that resource too as well, I think when it comes to missing people, because how urgent it is, you have to extract and use all resources immediately. And I think knowing the resources that you do have, and that would be the first step. And then knowing what you don't have, and then that's when you can move on forward. Because even as a family, knowing that this is the first time that they're using something with this type of technology and that can benefit somebody else, that's good to hear that it can help somebody else. But in our situation, that doesn't help us much, because that's something that could have been used months, if not weeks ago. So.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that we still have a lot of work to do as far as community engagement, because we know that we get 100 cases a month, yet there's 22 people on this meeting, and almost half of them are part of the committee, and that's just not a good sign. I thought it would be great if there was data that showed how the person was found. I haven't found anything, and I'm sure that, maybe DOJ could provide it or somebody could provide it, because then that would help us to direct where to put our resources, right? So if they're found, 80% of the cases are solved because of people, citizens finding them, then social media exposure immediately is a big push, right? But then we need to connect with these people. So I'll give you an example. NYPD has like 100 social media accounts. All of their officers are allowed to have a social media. A lot of agencies work that way because they know that that individual person will establish relationships with a small group of people. And when you add all those groups together, it equals the whole community, right? Where in Oakland right now, it's mainly being directed by the media office, which is fine, but we need to find a better way of communicating with the community, because people still think they have to wait 24 hours. So by the time they've called into OPD, there's already a loss of investigative time that's not any fault of the officers. And so I think that there's two things, innovation. I know that when the father that went running in 100-degree heat and went missing, because of where he went missing, there were a lot of techie people that were just community members out there. They created this whole location of a command post where they offered their services and their expertise about mapping and everything else. And so, we can learn from these other missing persons cases what resources are out there that maybe aren't police resources, but maybe one of those companies will partner with OPD and offer up one of their techs to do certain things. I don't know. I just feel like we have to think outside the box. It's way too many cases to not have a good amount of attention. And until and if we get the amount of officers and resources that we need, we have to figure a way to give these cases what they deserve in the interim. And so that's why I think that I've reached out to the Hidden Genius Project about doing some kind of an app. I don't even know what the app would be, but they're open to an idea of partnering with OPD. And they love the idea of having their young men learn about the connection of human trafficking and missing persons and being part of a solution or something that may offer a solution. So I think things like that where, you know, we can't put all the responsibility on OPD, the investigative side, yes, right? But what are these other things that we can do and what can we come up with as a community that may help to solve these cases in a positive way? So that's, you know, kind of where my mind is at this point.
Great, thank you. And I agree. And I think that, I mean, talking about specificity to Oakland, as we did earlier, I think that, you know, of course, one of the things we're hearing is that if we are short on sworn officers and sworn officers are being asked to do more than is reasonable, and even things that are potentially outside of their scope sometimes, some of the things that, you know, some of those strategies around looking for ways civilian staff and or collaborative agencies can help with some of these things around communication and just legwork, I think is a thing that we should definitely explore, as well as those technological aspects that Michelle was just talking about. So with that, I think I'm going to open this up to community Q&A, or just you know, comments if that is what if that is sort of, if people don't have questions and they just have comments, that's also totally an option. I will say that let's all remember that this is very real. There are humans involved. If everyone can sort of remain respectful with their engagements with each other, and as you'll see, as some of you are already using the comments, we have the comment chat on. So if you have something that you would like to share and you are not comfortable speaking up, please use chat. If you want to echo or reiterate something that somebody else has said, maybe the chat is the space to do that, so that we aren't sort of taking time away from somebody else. If there are people who are listening who have direct experience and or lived experience around this, I'd love to be able to prioritize their voices here. And beyond that, I also want to note that there's some members of the ad hoc in the participants section, and so if they would like to share a little of their experiences, I think that would also be appropriate. So if you could go ahead and raise your hands if you would like to speak up, Rania will sort of call you out, and we can get started.
Thank you, Commissioner Jordan. I see the first hand up is a phone number ending in 1362. If this is you, I've unmuted you. Please unmute yourself and start. 1362. Can you hear me? Okay, we'll come back to you. Let's move on. I see another phone number ending in 9901. I've unmuted you, my end. Please start talking.
Hi, I would just like to introduce myself. My name is Janine Duggar. I'm here this evening on behalf of my sister, Tatiana Duggar, who is unfortunately no longer with us. Tatiana was a beautiful girl. She had her whole life ahead of her, and it's really been a tragedy for many people, especially our family, that she's no longer with us. And I do respect this entire ad hoc for every effort that they've been trying to reform the missing persons unit, because me and my family full-heartedly feel like had things been reformed before this, there may have been some different outcomes for my sister on either end. And young men and women make mistakes all the time, but it should never cost their life. I think if Oakland Police responded quickly and with extreme concern about how we were in contact with her and how this is unlike her, that things would be different in possibility of finding her sooner or finding whoever has done this to her. or just more information, because my sister's case was a very complex case and it didn't start out like it should have. So the immediate concern and taking the family's word for what they're saying, I think, is a huge point. And if you take the person's or the family's concerns immediately and you believe them, you'll be easily, after looking into it, I think the police officer would be able to identify whether this family was telling the truth or not from what they investigate. So that's a huge part of it. And Tatiana's death is not on anyone's, I should say, is not anyone's fault. It is the person who took her life. And that person will have to deal with that when their time comes, and hopefully justice is served to them. But it's the process of taking care of the case and leading up to that was really a downfall in a lot of parts for our family. And there's so many cases, and there's so many girls that, you know, maybe just taking a little bit of extra time to really look into it or to be considerate of this person who's calling in, you might save somebody's life. And I know there's hundreds of cases, and hopefully soon you'll have more help to help with those cases. But during the meantime, I've lost somebody, my family's lost somebody, and it's been hell to try to deal with. And we're still dealing with it. I'm here today and I'm speaking on behalf of her and every other girl and boy who's not been found or has been found and they're not living anymore. And it's sad. And I think that this hopefully will change a lot of things that have to do with that. So thank you guys for letting me be here.
Ms. Duggar, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. So sorry for your loss. Thank you again. Okay, I'm going to try phone number ending in 1362. Let's try this again. I've unmuted you my end. You should see the prompt. Please press the button and try speaking. Phone number ending in 1362. Okay, still no joy. I'll find you separately if you want to share. Commissioner Jordan, those are all the hands that are up.
Okay, and incurious group. Nonetheless, I appreciate everyone showing up to hear what
Excuse me.
our
Sorry, Commissioner. Rashida Granage just raised her hand.
please, Rashida, what do you have to say?
Ms. Granage, unmuted when you're ready.
Yeah, the bad news is it's not Rashida. I just had to get on another, I had to get on my laptop where I was logged in on obviously the coalition's account. This is Ann Jenks. I really want to lift up this process because it seems to me that there's two ways that the police commission on its best day works. One is to listen to people who tell you that something's a problem within OPD and then work with them to fix it. And I think that's what's happened here. Obviously, the other way, as Ms. Duggar alluded to, was to identify a problem in advance. And this is what happened here. I mean, I really think that it's emblematic of what people in Oakland wanted when they created a police commission. They wanted somewhere that people could go, Oaklanders could go, and you know, ask to be heard and for solutions to be found. And I just thank everybody who's been involved with this, and for the families who are going through so much heartbreak to take your time and your energy to work on this. I'm deeply grateful to you all. I also hope that the process that this ad hoc went through is not viewed because of the outcome as an appropriate way to run an ad hoc. It is to this day not clear who the subject matter experts that were engaged, who they are. It's not on the website. We just we don't know. And you can't really figure out what's missing if you don't know who's being listened to. I have questions about the document, but it's not questions of just, oh no, I think you should say it this other way. I want to have a better understanding of why a decision was made to do it the way it was done. And understanding that process is only available if the ad hoc meetings are open and available. Somebody commented that they were disappointed that there weren't more people here. I'm not saying that opening the process and being transparent would have guaranteed you more people, because sometimes something is just too far in the weeds to really get a lot of participation or engagement. But transparency is important, so that if somebody is curious, if somebody is interested, they have the opportunity to understand and watch that process. And it was missing in this ad hoc. Appointing community members never is going to replace letting community members watch. Because, I mean, look, I've served on an ad hoc, and I would argue that my ad hoc was flawed because I don't represent the entire community. You simply can't represent the entire community when the commission is selecting community members to participate. And this process, where we really don't see it until we see a document that is largely completed, is missing out on some opportunities to get new ideas and fresh ideas that I think that you've missed. What the police commission has learned is every time they've engaged more people and had more voices and more transparency, the work has been better. One of the things that I'm concerned about, but of course I don't really know because I was unable to watch, is all of the discussion around, well, what are the best practices? Because what we've learned is that sometimes you don't want to look at best practices. Sometimes you just want to do something that nobody else has done yet. But we weren't there for the discussions. I wanted to hear more about the thoughts behind specifically how sex workers are addressed. I think sometimes the discussion of sex worker gets lost in the discussion of sex trafficking. There are people who are engaged in sex work because it's their best economic option at the moment. And sometimes when they engage with OPD, they have real problems engaging. And I've heard that when somebody tries to report a sex worker is missing, although in my mind, that would mean that you would identify her as a at-risk person, given the nature of sex work. Instead, OPD has reacted to it very negatively and suggested that being a sex worker means that they're going to take that missing person case even less seriously. I'd like to hear more about disabled people. I am concerned about that. I didn't see anything in terms of the expectation of keeping up with the family or the original reporter. I'm sure there are issues involved in terms of confidentiality when you're dealing with an adult. But again, unable to listen to the conversation. I don't have a way of understanding what the issues were, how they were decided, who the experts were that were involved, and who's missing from this discussion. So I think it's one of, what is it? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This is extraordinary work, and I thank everybody involved. I have concerns, and I really wish that the commission takes to heart that just because you've done a good job here doesn't mean this is a good process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jenks.
One
Go
second,
ahead.
Rania.
Okay.
I mean, because it sounded like Anne had some actual questions for the panel, and I'd like to give them an opportunity to respond. I personally would like to respond to her thoughts around transparency, and I don't disagree. I think that this is a iterative and evolving process, and I think what we've done here is marginally better than what we did in the last ad hoc, and hopefully, ideally, we get to the point where we have transparency that is satisfactory to Anne, although I do question whether that is possible. I mean, to satisfy Anne, whether that's possible. But I think that we can definitely make some improvements in transparency in general. I am interested in opening that question up to the rest of the panel because it was a topic of discussion around how we prioritize cases and also the question of sex workers, because it did come up and it was actually a fairly contentious conversation at the time. Feel free to hop in, anyone.
Commissioner, I can speak to that. We did bring in experts for the human trafficking, and I'm sorry to hear that people are feeling that we do not take sex workers' cases seriously. That is not the case at all. As a matter of fact, anything, especially CSEC cases, child sexual exploitation, go right to the top. So I'm sorry about that misconception, but that's definitely not part of our unit here. And I think we did have a very long conversation, and we brought in experts specifically around the sex trafficking when we wrote this policy. But and that's a long conversation. But I just want the public to know that we did take that and the commission vetted that quite thoroughly when we wrote this policy.
Yeah, I'll hop in on that as well. This is Meredith from CPRA. I definitely, we did have a conversation about it. And in particular, sort of, I mean, I understand Ms. Jenks's concern about, you know, whether or not somebody who is willfully engaging in sex work, can they, you know, does that minimize the fact that they're missing in some way in the eyes of OPD? And I do think that there is, you know, concern about that maybe a disappearance. And let's be honest, we know even without sort of like body positive, sex work positive discussions that we're having today, like it's always been the case where somebody who is either willfully or being exploited in like the sex work area has sort of always been, you know, not taken as seriously or perhaps like not advocated for as much as they should be. And so I certainly, one of the things that we had a conversation around was potentially adding some language specifically about sexual exploitation. I know that it is in part of the policy in terms of, I think, notifications, but it did not make it into the language in terms of, I think it was around at risk and whether or not it, you know, it should be in something where it says maybe a victim of a crime. But I don't view this document necessarily as like the final version. And I think that this is a crucial part of the process, is to hear what people have to say. And I think that that is something that could be readdressed, especially given, you know, that was something that my personal feeling was to add some language in. And I think I don't know if we definitely decided against it, but it was really just, we hadn't added it. So I'm happy, I appreciate your feedback, and I'm happy to hear that that's something you feel, you know, strongly should be very clearly stated in the policy, because I think that's something we need to take under submission and look at again.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Jordan, can I move on to the next speaker? And
yeah, and I think that I think it's just important that the sort of concerns that were brought up around sex work and the difference between being trafficked and somebody who is acting, who has agency and is making that choice, those were discussed, and that did factor heavily into our conversation around prioritization of cases, and as stated, it is, you know, because that meeting isn't open to the public, the context of that is not always clear, but it was in fact at the forefront of our minds during significant period of this policy. So yes, unless somebody else wants to weigh in on that topic, I suggest we move forward.
Well, I wonder, I do see that Deneen Duggar's number, she's written in the chat, she'd love to add a comment. I don't know if her comment is regarding this, but maybe that would be appropriate.
If it's
Absolutely.
okay, I'd like to take them in order, but I will come back to Ms. Duggar. I have seen Commissioner Harris had her hand up. Commissioner Harris, when you're ready. Just one moment. Let's see. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you to this ad hoc for all the work. It felt very strenuous, this particular policy. Not once have I heard my niece's name, Priscilla Castro, come up in this conversation. And she was one of the other reasons that I decided to join this ad hoc. So I just want to remind people that Priscilla's no longer with us either. She was burned beyond recognition, and she actually started the Mendocino fire. So she was reported missing in Oakland as well, but you don't hear about her. Another point I want to bring is that oftentimes, from my experience, and I'll speak from is that when particular interest groups want to join ad hocs, they oftentimes attack the police department, which does not give them a fair shot at answering the questions we have, or answering in a way that they don't feel like they're going to get demonized for it. And I've seen it. And so I felt like, you know, there are particular groups out there that believe they know everything. And, you know, as Ms. Jenks stated, that they don't speak for everybody. And so I only speak from my own experience. And so I only can give what I know. But we had put out a few things, Michelle and I, for people to come to, especially for sex traffickers, and not one person showed up, no one. And so it goes on every year, and there's an organization that does it for people in sex work. And I just want people to know that.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Harris, and sorry again for your loss. Ms. Duggar, let me unmute you. Oh,
yes, I just wanted to piggyback on the part where it is, I think this might maybe possibly tie into Priscilla Castro as well, that the leading agency is wherever this person's last known residence is, and that they would be in charge of the case, and Oakland would assist as much as they can. And I know that's your process, but I also feel like it is very easily to deflect that type of heavy case from the police department. And it's not always as black and white as, well, they live here and they went missing there, but the communication was lacking for my sister's case when it came to that portion of the investigation. So if it could be more clear from going from here, as we're reforming the missing persons unit, that from the beginning, you know, why is this? Well, this is her last known residence and this is what we're doing. But if the communication between the two agencies isn't there, it's not going to transfer over very well. And that creates another problem within the investigation. So even though both women were not from Oakland, they both went missing from there. And I don't know for Priscilla's case, but I know for my sister's, it was very hard to know who was doing what and where this was going if both agencies involved. So maybe somewhere along the lines we could figure out having just one point of contact would work, or both point of contacts all working together and speaking to the family at the same time. I just know that was a part of the investigation that was not always clear.
Thank you, Ms. Duggar. panelist or Commissioner Jordan, any comments for Commissioner Harris and Ms. Duggar on that one?
I don't have any specific comments. I think I like to thank former Commissioner Harris for showing up and all of the work that she did as a member of this ad hoc. And for Ms. Duggar, again, we're all terribly sorry for your loss, and we can only hope that what you brought to this and the things that you shared with us here can help sort of improve the process for people going forward. And we do really very much appreciate you taking part here tonight and early on in the process.
Thank you.
I don't know if we have anyone else looking to make comments. I didn't see anyone. And if not, I'd like to give the panel members an opportunity to sort of share some final thoughts, anything that you feel like has been missed or you want to express before we wrap it up tonight. And if you don't have thoughts, that's okay. I don't want to call you out, but just call it out. Just you have anything to say.
All I want to say is this is a beginning. So, and I wanted to acknowledge that a beginning is movement. So that's something that's important, that it wasn't futile and we've done some work, and that's a beginning point, and we can move forward from there. And hopefully even the few things that have changed already may help one of the 100 families this month that call in.
To Michelle's point, this is a multi-layered, critically challenging subject matter. And there are so many specifics that don't always overlap. And so trying to decide what you highlight and what plan forward, doesn't always lend itself to the next case. And so I'm just really very appreciative that we took a look at as many approaches as possible in order to try and capture the most that respond to the overall population of people that are missing for whatever reasons that they are missing. I know that both Michelle and Janelle finding some of the updated missing persons policies from in and around the Bay Area informed us greatly late into our process. And to her point, this is an evolution. This is progress. As long as we're moving forward, we're going in the right direction. We are by no means finished. This is extremely complicated work because there's no one answer all the time. But I'm really proud of the work that everyone has done. And to Anne's point, if we can list all of the members of the ad hoc, that would be great. So I'm sure that Rania, you'd probably be in the best position to list the names of the folks. And if you don't have the names of the guest speakers who addressed us, then we can provide you with that as well, because their contributions were outstanding.
Great, thank you. And just to acknowledge Chair and to Anne, the members of the ad hoc are actually listed, I think, on the missing persons webpage, but I can certainly work with the Chair and Commissioner Jackson to add speakers that joined and SMEs. But the members, you guys already have the members up on the webpage.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much.
So I saw that Anne Jenks had made asked a couple questions in the chat, and we did not have representatives from mental health, anybody specifically representing the mental health community or sort of disability community. We did have Amber Johnson from Dreamcatcher come in and essentially took one whole meeting wherein we discussed a lot of the sort of dynamics around sex work and trafficking as sort of distinct things. And I think that was helpful in framing a lot of the conversations that moved forward from there. And I also want to point out that I wasn't trying to diminish your desire for transparency, and I was simply trying to make a joke that you are a very demanding advocate, and I mean, I don't disagree with you. So, Rania, do we have any more hands, or shall we sort of move to wrap this up?
Commissioner Jordan, I was going to say on the suggestion of Ms. Jenks, I think we probably should invite someone. I don't know if we're going to invite a family member that's reported someone that's mentally ill missing, or a disabled person, or if she wants us to invite the actual missing person. Because I have mentally ill people in my family, and there is definitely, and I know that Community Service Officer Davis has definitely handled calls where there was someone that was disabled and mentally ill, and it does change the focus in some of the tools that are used in that particular type of investigation. So it probably would be worth it to us to have people from those groups attend a meeting and speak to us.
Yeah, or somebody. I think that there's that sort of intersection of homelessness and mental health, substance use, and all of those things. And I think that was distinctly one of the things I heard from Officer Davis in that the scope of a lot of her work represented those adults who were sort of within the BART system, who fell into that category, or one of those categories, or all three. And there's some challenges around specifically how those cases are investigated, because those are sort of adults acting with their own sort of on their own recognizance, but have still been reported missing because of their challenges. And so, yeah, that is probably an appropriate addition to this thought process. So, point taken.
I would also, if I can just pop in and say, I mean, I would encourage, again, obviously there's some community members here who I'm sure you guys have a lot of ties to the community and to these other sort of special interest groups that you're bringing up that we may not have necessarily talked to. And aside, obviously I'm not leading the ad hoc, but I think it's a good idea, and I recommend passing on the information to them. Like, we're still taking the feedback. So if you know of organizations or people who do liaise with these kinds of things, please do let them know that we have this draft policy up. Are there specific things that are of concern that haven't been addressed? I think a lot of the stuff also that is being raised, I mean, there's sort of policies and best practices, and not everything can sort of end up going in the DGO, because it's sort of supposed to be like, what are we holding the officer to in making sure that they do as like a regular thing for every case. But I do think that OPD is also working on other sort of like training mechanisms as well. So there may be space to, I mean, I think there's plenty of space to improve current practices as well, but definitely, and they don't know the conversation the draft is based on. Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just reading the chat. But I think, the draft alone might, if they see something, like for me, if I see a draft of the policy, one of the ways I got involved was like saying, hey, there should be X in this policy. So if that's something that, can be flagged, I just appreciate anybody in the community to, sort of pass on the word to get more feedback, because it's true. I mean, it is kind of this laborious process, and it's important to get as much feedback as we can, because the DGOs do stick around for quite some time. And I appreciate, and I just want to say also thank you everybody for being here, and in particular to Harrison Bandabaila and Deneen Duggar. We really appreciate I don't have to say we, but I really appreciate you guys participating and your feedback. So thank you.
Agreed. Yeah, and I want to thank everyone who took part in the ad hoc in whatever capacity. The members of the police department that were there throughout. Bridget Cook as well, Dr. Sarai Crane, Deneen Duggar, Janelle Harris, and it's been a sort of long, sometimes challenging but rewarding collaborative process. And this was helpful. I feel like we heard a few things tonight that we can sort of seek to address in our final meetings on this and move it forward for approval. So thanks for everyone coming. And Chair, do you want to add anything else before we wrap up?
No, just one big thank you. Meredith said, we appreciate, I appreciate, no, we appreciate collectively. Every comment has been valued. And like I said, this is a critically multi-layered series of challenges. And so I want to make sure that we are able to include as many of the comments that we heard tonight and then move it forward, because as somebody said, and it might have been you, Commissioner Jordan, we don't want to be perfection, to be the enemy of good. Let's get something out there that is much better than what we had, because it will move that entire process forward. So thank you.
All right, and with that, I think maybe we have reached the end of this. I'd like to thank Michelle and Meredith and Officer Davis, Harrison Bandabela, and Sergeant Young for joining us here and taking the time, and being here on camera, available to answer questions and share your knowledge. So thanks so much for showing up, and thank everyone who was here listening in.
Absolutely.
I think that's it.